Welcome back to the Civically Minded Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Wing. Tonight, I'm going to change it up a little bit, do my first interview. I thought I'd bring on one of the best Christians I know, and certainly my favorite Christian. Tonight, it's my wife, Kristin Wing.
Hi.
She's been my wife for just celebrated our 12th anniversary last month, and that's 12 years of my life.
Yeah.
That's 12 years of my life, too.
You took my line.
And so I just wanted to bring her on. So one, it kind of get to know me a little bit better for those of you who have just met me through the channel here, and even some of those that have known me outside of this, but maybe never had the chance to meet my wife. So this is my lovely bride. We're going to talk a little bit about Christian womanhood tonight and just family and kind of what we try to do as husband and wife to raise godly kids. Which, how many kids do we have?
We have 3 amazing children. So Charlie May is going to be 8 in about a week or so, and Micah is 4, and little Ruby Jean is just over a year old. So, and
a couple of cats that keep trying to run into frame here. So, so we have a pretty full house. We live on about a 15-acre kind of mini farm just north of Charlotte, and we have some goats and some cows, and honestly, we've got a better life than I think we deserve. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'd start us off with a real hard-hitting, almost editorial-style question. After 12 years, what is your favorite part of being married to me?
Ooh, my favorite? No. So I have married like the man of my dreams. So I have to say, probably you make me laugh. He is an extremely witty man, and I love a good wit. You are a great leader.
Don't believe it.
Yes. He leads our family, and I appreciate that. And as a strong minded individual woman, it was a long time before I felt comfortable giving up the reins to somebody, and you were the right person. So,
well, that's a great segue kind of into another topic.
Oh, I didn't mean to, but great.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about kind of leadership, gender roles, and kind of as a Christian woman, how that's changed for you as you've been saved and the longer that you've been, walking with Christ, how maybe Reformed doctrine has helped with that, and kind of how you feel that works itself out, certainly in our home, and maybe even biblically for those watching.
Ooh. How much time do we have? Oh my goodness, that was a big question.
2 to 3 minutes.
So I was a feminist before I met my husband, and felt that women were equal to men, and I still think we're equal, but it's a different type of equal. We were equal in the sight of God, but and in our worth, obviously, but I thought anything that a man can do, I can do better. And I wanted to keep my last name. I wanted my children to have my last name. And then it was shortly after I became saved, I started realizing that I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy being in charge. And I worked so hard to be the leader, the one in charge. And once I got that, I realized I was very resentful towards the person that I was with, because he made me be that way. And it was then I realized that I was looking for a godly man that was going to be a leader and buck up to me and stand toe to toe with me. And so that's where you came along, my love.
So I've heard it said by some pastors that I follow and that I look up to quite a bit. The old adage, of course, in the church and kind of in Christian family dogma is that Christian husbands lead by serving, and if that's not working, then double down on serving. And certainly there's a place for servant leadership. I think we have a wonderful example, obviously, in Christ Jesus. But I also have come to realize that, especially now with 3 young children and a wife, that husbands and I'm going to ask my wife if she agrees with this. So I will get her opinion on this. That I think one of the best ways that we serve our families is by leading. And I think maybe the first time I heard that explained in that type of fashion was maybe Pastor Doug Wilson. I've heard it a few times since then, but it was a paradigm shift for me as well, that we don't just lead through service. That is an aspect of it, most assuredly. Men, you can do the dishes, you can help with some laundry, things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, it's quite appreciated. But there are things that we bring to the table that, quite honestly, our wives are not best suited for, just because that's not how God created them. It's not how God made them, and didn't give them the same abilities and talents in some regards that he gave us as men, and vice versa, of course. So I've learned, as the longer I've walked with Christ and the longer I've been married, and of course now raising children as well, that one of the best ways I serve my family is through leading and being consistent in that leadership. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Mental note for
Yes.
future interviews: ask open-ended questions, because those close-ended questions will really bite you in the rear.
Well, and maybe give the interviewee maybe a list of your questions beforehand, so they can start to think about how they want to answer.
Maybe
that might be a good idea.
You've had 13 years to prep for this interview. So if kind of family roles and that type of thing within a marriage is important, tell me a little bit about, kind of, as we've got, again, a soon-to-be 8-year-old, what you've learned. Probably give me the top 2, maybe top 3 lessons that God has taught you in your first 8 years as a mother.
Ooh, great question. I would have to say one of the biggest things he's taught me is to be more unselfish. Selfishness is easy for me to gravitate towards, and I say that shamefully. I don't say that in a proud way, but having children, I will gladly split my cookie and give my kids half the cookie. Just as an example.
When it comes to cookies, I'm not nearly as giving as she is. Like my coat, I would take off and give to one of my colder children, but no, I keep my cookies. That's why she looks like she looks, and I look like I look. So certainly a lack of diminishment of selfishness. And then I think that
kind of goes with the territory.
And any good parent, and I would think even probably non-believing parents, that's just part of raising progeny. Right. So what other qualities do you think God has helped you with in being a mother?
I would say, hey, Lady Sage, I would say he has really started to work on my heart about the time that I spend with him, and it really comes to light. I'm such a busy person, and even when I'm not busy, and when I'm not in a hurry, I'm still rushing for some reason. But I'm just a ball of urgency. Actually, I'll use Ruby as an example, because it might be an easier example to hold on to. When Ruby Jean was just having a bad day, and all she wanted to do was cry, and I hadn't seen her all day, and I come home, and she's ready to go to bed. She's tired, and she's crying, and
I'm not a whole lot of help.
Yeah, well, not right now. Kids get to like him a little bit more when they're about 3 years old. Then they start digging Papa a little bit more. But for right now, it's all about Mama. And and I remember thinking, I'm just glad to spend time with her. No matter what time that was, no matter if it was a time where she was tired, or a time where she was angry or just hungry, I just wanted her to be in my presence. And that was one thing that God had shown me, is that he wants he wants that time apart with him, but any time that I can give him, whether I'm currently eating or just walking from to my car, it doesn't matter. He just wants all of me and in every walk of my life.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. I would have to say that's probably a lesson that I've had to, really learn and think about, because it goes against the grain. I think we think that
Well, if I'm
walking
going to
with
spend
Christ,
time, I need to
has to
spend that
be, that's
quality
right.
time.
Yeah, it's got to be. We're reading 10 chapters,
Right.
of deep theology, and
And we're saying
especially
a 10-minute, 15-minute prayer.
and it's got to be extremely high, proper, and I agree with you, as having kids has taught me as well, that just being with them,
Well,
is wonderful.
and another thing that they taught me is, if it obviously a lot of y'all have not heard my husband pray, but he's an amazing prayer, and I feel like I'm just such a child when I pray, and I don't feel like I'm an adequate prayer, and I know some of y'all feel the same way. You know what I'm feeling right now, and what my children taught me is when Charlie prays and she has such a simple prayer, and that is just a sweet aroma into God's nostrils, even as simple as what that is. And it almost taught me that even my prayers and how raw and undignified they are, God still loves them.
Yeah, again, unbelievably helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I tend to agree with that. That as someone in my own position, who's in seminary, already working full time at a church, heading towards full time ministry and more kind of robust, full throated ways of teaching elder eventually. Someone who already preaches, once a month, and you can get very formal, and extremely heady in all of your godly application. And then I sometimes realize that I have to bring it back down to where our 4-year-old can understand it. So we try to do family worship, of course, pretty regularly, and try to catechize the kids, because I'm a firm believer that if you're not catechizing your wife and children, someone else is doing it for you. And I've realized that sometimes I forget that I'm speaking to my children, and I
Yeah,
think
you do.
I think I'm in the pulpit, on a Sunday morning to a congregation full of adults, and right now our 8-year-old, who's really, starting to read better and things, she wants to be involved. So she wants to take the little book that we go through in our family worship time, and she wants to read some of the prayers, and she wants to read some of the confessions, and it's easier for me to do it, so it's more efficient, it's more succinct, and she stumbles over some of those big words, because catechism's not always easy, and I have to remind myself, and I don't always do a good job, I'll be honest, but I have to remind myself that she's 8 and my son's 4, and they're going to approach God differently than how their 45-year-old father does, who's been to Bible college and seminary, and has been doing this 2 or 3 or 4 times longer than they've been alive. So it is amazing how God uses children and marriage, of course, in these amazingly huge ways to take scripture and take these theological lessons that we've read about all these years, and really start to put flesh on the bones,
Right.
and help us to see these concepts in very real world applicable ways. So let's shift gears here just a little bit. We talked a little bit about gender roles in the home. We talked a little bit about what things God has taught you and me as well.
Did we talk about gender roles in the home?
Well, let's do that a little bit.
I don't think we've really dove in there. Yeah, let's do a little diving.
Let's do that. You go ahead.
Well, no, you go ahead. You go ahead and start the conversation, and I'll. Okay. This is kind of our MO. He carries on the conversation, and I just chime in with things that are important.
I miss all the high stuff apparently. But what we've found works for us is and we found it's worked for us because we believe that that's the biblical position, of course, is that the father and the husband is kind of the federal head of the home, and the home, whether it's the wife, the kids, they really are not going to grow much past where that father leads. Of course, there are homes that unfortunately that maybe the father and the husband's no longer there. Maybe there's been a death or a divorce. Maybe the wife and the kids are believers and the husband's not. So there are exceptions, of course, to this rule. But in a Christian home where the husband and the wife and all the kids are professing Christians or in Presbyterianism covenant children, the father really sets the pace.
And guys, let me tell you how important that is. Your wives or future wives are longing for you to be the spiritual head of your home. Women do not want to be the spiritual head of their home. They want the man that's going to lead the Bible studies. They want the man that's going to lead them closer to God and deeper in their faith. They don't want to be the ones that's the primary leader of their family. So that's a really important point.
Yeah, and we need to remember that this is just because it's what the Bible teaches. Remember, Paul says in Ephesians chapter 5 that husbands are to wash their wives with the word and to cleanse her and to kind of sanctify her with the word, because what we have found out in our marriage, and again, this gets into a little something that I wanted to talk about, and we can kind of blend this in with the gender roles.
Being a weaker vessel?
No, but that's great. And that husbands, we think protection always means physical. That if someone broke through our front door here while we were recording this, it would be incumbent upon me to get up, and defend my wife, defend my kids, physically, and to expend my own life if I had to in their defense. And it certainly means that. Do not misunderstand me. It certainly means that. But they need us to defend them from the world. Our children and our wives need us to defend them from all of the evils that are out there. And boy, are there a bunch of them these days. They need us to defend them from the stuff on Netflix that maybe we shouldn't be bringing into the home, and the stuff on the playlist that maybe isn't appropriate because you haven't really listened to the lyrics. It just sounds really good.
We need our husbands to sometimes defend us against our children. And I say that because women need a husband that is going to stand up for her when someone is coming against her, no matter who that person is. And if you don't have that, if the man, and I'm going to just flat out say what I'm going to say, if the man shirks his responsibility for first and foremost loving his wife and defending his wife, even if it's against his own children, then that breeds an environment for disrespectful children, because they could speak to their mother any way they want to. And it can be very detrimental if the man does not lead in that.
Well, and again, I think I've used the word consistency a few times. One of the things that I found has been most helpful, certainly as a father, but even as a husband, is learning to be consistent. And I can tell you, that was a lesson that it took me decades to start to learn myself. As a younger man, I shared in one of my earlier videos my road to Reformed faith and how I came into the Presbyterian Church. And one of the things about my testimony is I didn't finish my undergraduate college. I was way too interested in the social aspects and goofing off. And I was not a self-disciplined individual at all. I had no self-discipline really in any area whatsoever. So I've had to learn over the years how to discipline myself in lots of different facets, not only for my own spiritual health, but really for the spiritual health of my wife and my children.
Yes.
So
agreed.
How can a husband, beyond being consistent, beyond being demanding of his wife's integrity, his wife's respect, even from his own kids, even from her family.
Right.
Sometimes, parents and things can have, in-laws, which would be my in-laws. And my in-laws are great, by the way. They are wonderful. So I don't have this problem. But I know families that do struggle with this, where there's some really difficult dynamics. And it really is the husband's job to make sure that he's defending her from all of those people, no matter how close the relationship is. The day that she said I do to you,
the day that you said I don't to everybody else.
That's right.
And she said I don't to everybody else.
So you become a new family unit. And from how the scriptures talk about it, the two become one flesh, and they're really there should be no space there for anyone to get in between. Whether that's family, the devil, the world, there should be such closeness there that there's no space for anyone to get in between, no foothold to be gained, and that's important to really do. So tell me a little bit, because my channel I've looked at analytics and things. I've got almost a 90% male audience, and my content thus far has been primarily geared to men. But I want to soften that up a little bit. So tell me.
And you're asking me to soften that
up? That's right. Tell me some of the things that you think specifically, uniquely are pitfalls or maybe sin issues that women struggle with, that maybe their husbands are unaware of, and they don't even know that it's happening. So they certainly don't know how they can come alongside and help them.
Good one. Let's see. I think women, our sin of choice, we have a few sins of choice. One is definitely on the top of the list, that anxiety, being anxious and scared. And a lot of that stems from being scared about their protection, and they might view their protection in finances. They might view their protection in health, but we, I should say, do struggle with more anxious tendencies. And I think that's just across the board. Another sin of choice that I believe women struggle with more so than men, not saying that men can't struggle with anxiety or can't struggle with this other sin, but I would definitely say gossip is another huge sin problem of women. And I recently did a Bible study on gossip. And what a lot of people don't know about gossip is that gossip is speaking the truth about somebody, not a lie, because that would be slander. But it would be speaking the truth about someone that would paint them in some sort of negative light. And when you realize that's the definition of gossiping, is truth telling. It's just truth telling when you're painting somebody in a negative light. That really changes the way that you look at things, and the way that you would hopefully want to change the way that you talk about folks, because nobody wants to be known as a gossiper, but it's just something that we naturally do. I think because we talked about this the other day, women talk about people. We talk about the people we love, the people in our lives, and we like to talk. And men talk about.
We rib each other,
Yes.
the way men kind of relate to each other. I think we were talking about this, about the article with Pastor Kevin DeYoung and Pastor Wilson,
right,
with the Moscow mood and some of that, and how fundamentally I feel like their disagreement is a disagreement in tone and tenor, a disagreement in just, again, mood's probably a great word for it, actually, that the Moscow mood is a little bit more robust and masculine, and kind of that ribbing and jovial spirit that men consistently do. And I've said for years, with this whole feminist movement, the egalitarian movement of women saying, "Oh, I just want to be treated like a man." No, you don't. Yeah, we are ruthless to each other. You don't want to be treated like a man. I grew up playing a lot of sports, played sports all the way through high school, got some scholarship offers to play in college. You don't want to be treated the way we treat each other. That is a uniquely male thing, and that's, and whereas women, women will be gracious to each other even when they don't mean it, just
That's
because,
right.
again, they're so feelings oriented. I think that when I look at gossip, especially when I look at gossip within the church or
Church.
within, the Christian community, I see it in such veiled ways. And what I mean by that, I guess, is the church gossip that you see is, oh, did you hear about so and so? Let's pray for them.
Yes.
And it sounds so well intentioned, and maybe it even is, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's really just, hey, did you hear about so and so? Oh,
Well,
by the way, we need to pray about them.
Well, and at the end of the day, if you're telling someone somebody else's news or something about somebody else, you would always want to ask yourself, would they be okay if you told someone else? Would you have the discussion if they were an earshot away and still feel right telling someone else when they could hear everything? Did you get their permission to talk about it? So there's a series of questions you can ask yourself before you ask for prayer for someone, to make sure that your heart is in the right place, whether it is truly asking for prayer or whether it's a form of gossiping.
Yeah, you get to that heart of intention, and again, these more nefarious sins that, again, as a younger man and not as deep in my faith, and I hadn't walked with Christ as long as I have now, I had such big sins that he was cleaning up, all the really juicy, nasty ones that were right there on the outside for everyone to see. And for most of us during that sanctification process, he does start drilling down, and getting at your thought life and getting at your, some of the, the things we say, the things we think, the intentions of our hearts. And that's the real juicy, meaty stuff of your deeper faith walk.
That's right. And then I would say another sin, the third and final, I would think that sin of choice of women would be contentment. Finding contentment in your life, in your children, in well, first and foremost in God. But I think women especially struggle with contentment. If you are a stay-at-home mom, I've met a lot of stay-at-home moms that long for more and don't find fulfillment in the role that they have, as a stay-at-home mommy and as a homemaker and a full-time mommy. And then you get full-time working mommies that struggle with working full-time and not being home with the family as much as that they want to be home. Then you have women that are struggle with their self-confidence and the way that they look, and the list goes on and on. Your finances, it's finding contentment in where God has placed you in your life, the roles that he has blessed you with, and the resources that he's blessed you with.
I think one of the things that I found so helpful over the years is understanding that, and Reformed doctrine and theology has helped me with this, is really understanding a better, deeper knowledge of the providence and the sovereignty of God, and that really nothing happens in our lives that God hasn't allowed to happen and hasn't orchestrated to happen. In my house, and she'll smile when I say this, I say means and ends all the time. It's kind of one of the things that gets said at my house quite often. And what I mean by that is God is sovereign, and by being sovereign, he has planned the ends from the beginning. And the only way to plan the ends from the beginning and to do it in a way that guarantees the ends that you want is to plan the means that are going to accomplish those ends. And so, witnessing and prayer and preaching and marriage and raising children, those are all various means that God uses to get to the ends that he's already preordained before the foundations of the world. And so when I think about the role that a wife plays in a husband's life, or that a husband plays in a wife's life, or that parents play in kids' lives, they can't really be overstated. It's unbelievable that we go through day to day kind of undervaluing the huge aspects of these relationships, and not really fully appreciating the depths to which that we're going to directly influence the walk with God that each of us are going to have.
Absolutely.
So having said that, and having heard kind of your three big sins that maybe women struggle with, which let me recap, just make sure I understood you. You've got anxiety, right?
Yeah.
You have contentment.
Yeah.
And you have gossip.
Yeah.
So how can husbands, in the spirit of what we see in Scripture, that it says to bear one another's burdens, to come alongside.
How can you help me with that?
How can a husband come alongside his wife with those three particular sins and help encourage her, challenge her, maybe when needed, reprimand even, and encourage her to get back into a more biblical worldview when it comes to those sins?
Whoa. I one of the I would say the best ways to help her with those things is, number one, have an open dialogue about it. If your wife does struggle with one of those things, and you know if she does, you should know. If you spend any amount of time with her, what her sins of choice are, having a discussion with her about where she is in her walk with those sins, and maybe any of the challenges that she's facing, and pray with her. And not just for her. Praying for her is essential, and that's a given. But praying with her and her hearing your prayers for her is very important.
Excellent. Well,
Thank
sweetheart.
you.
No, thank you. Thank you. I think we went about as long as I wanted to go this evening,
Okay.
and I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
And not just tonight, but all of your time as my wife and the mother of my children. I wouldn't want to do this journey with anybody but you.
I wouldn't want to do it without you either, baby.
You've made my life a better, much, much better thing than it was before you came along. So from the Wing family, Corey and Kristin, and our three children who we're just not comfortable with on camera, we just want to say thank you so very much for coming along on the ride with us and getting to know us a little bit better. If you like anything that we're doing here on the Civically Minded podcast, and you appreciate kind of the biblical worldview that we're trying to bring, a little bit of civics, a little bit of ecclesiology, a little bit of family, current events, then, think about hitting that like button, maybe subscribe.
Would you have a subscribe down there? Is it down there?
It's down there somewhere. and maybe share it with a friend. We'd sure appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you again real soon on the Civically Minded podcast.